to win. The rate of crime increase in 1968 in the last 6 months was 28%. We brought that almost to a standstill. In the first 6 months of this year, it was only 1%. If we get the chance, we can turn it around.
If law and order is an issue this year, the argument is over the record of the Nixon administration in fighting crime and the use of narcotics. Both candidates say continuing that fight should get top priority. But the Democrats say the administration hasn't done enough, that although the FBI says the rate of serious crimes reported has slowed down considerably, the actual number of serious crimes reported since Nixon became president has continued to skyrocket.
Since Mr. Nixon came into office, the crime rate in this country, and this means the number of serious crimes reported annually, has increased by more than 30%, and the number of people on hard drugs in this country has doubled since January of 1969. I don't take delight in citing those figures, but they do indicate that it's going to take more than oratory and election year politicking to correct this problem.
Wrapped up with the crime and drug problems is the idea that America has become a permissive society. The president points to his Supreme Court selections as examples of what a second Nixon administration could accomplish in that area.
I will say to you that any appointments that I have the opportunity to make to the courts of this land or to the law enforcement officials of this land, as has been the case in the last 4 years, you can be sure that the age of permissiveness is gone. We're not going to have room for more permissive judges.
McGovern is highly critical of the Nixon court appointees. He blames the slow-moving judicial process for many domestic problems and promises a complete overhaul of the court system. Earlier this year, it was thought that marijuana would be an issue, especially after Senator McGovern suggested that marijuana be regulated much the same way as alcohol. But now both candidates are saying practically the same thing. Both Mr. Nixon and Senator McGovern say they are opposed to legalization of marijuana, but the senator does favor less stringent penalties for its use. Abortion was one issue thrust upon the candidates that neither sought to develop. Both said it was a question for the states, not the federal government, to decide. But President Nixon went on record opposing abortion, defending the rights of the unborn. He has not answered the women's groups who argue that a woman should have the right to control her own body. Senator McGovern, however, stated that abortion is a private matter to be decided between a woman and her doctor. Busing has been primarily a Nixon issue. The president flatly stated he opposes the busing of children to achieve a racial balance. He stated there are more effective means for achieving quality education for all Americans. Mr. Nixon stated that if Congress does not act to prevent such busing, he will move in the direction of a constitutional amendment. George McGovern charges the president has used the busing issue for purely political purposes. McGovern himself says busing is permissible, but only as a last resort to correct unequal education. An issue Senator McGovern tried to develop was corruption within the administration and favoritism toward big business. In a New York Times ad, he cited the ITT case, the grain deal, and other irregularities, which he cited as examples of corruption in a kind of a campaign litany.
We have the issue drawn between a leadership which is controlled and dictated and directed by the special interests, or we have an opportunity to put forward a leadership that will advance the public interest and the long-term interests of this country above all other considerations.
One issue where the Republicans and the Democrats differ considerably this year is the question of amnesty, whether or not to permit draft evaders and deserters to return to the United States after the Vietnam War ends. It's a question both parties have hammered at throughout the campaign.
We will not grant blanket amnesty to deserters and draft dodgers.
I would give these young men the opportunity to come home. Personally, if I were in their position, I would volunteer for 2 years of public service on subsistence pay simply to demonstrate that my objection was not to serving the nation, but to participating in a war I thought was morally wrong.